The mechanic working on this VW Polo probably had to take a second look just to make sure he was seeing what he thought he was seeing. Customer states, engine started making a little noise a while back, but I just turned the radio up a bit and it sorted itself out. This car last saw some fresh oil 38,000 miles ago. This car rolled in with some starting issues, and when the mechanic lifted the hood, it looked like whoever worked on it last had gone through a pretty serious duct tape phase. Customer states, I live near the ocean, so yeah, there's a little surface rust, but she's solid where it counts. Customer states, hit a seagull on my way to the grocery store, and now car feels different. A seagull, huh? Customer states, had a guy come out and patch up the undercarriage for me, said it would last another 10 years easy. Customer states, everything's fine with the car mechanically, I just needed to swap the windshield wipers and maybe top up some coolant. Oh, and don't move Sandra, please. And the owner of this car was absolutely certain the engine was running better than ever, after his cousin had just finished tuning it for him. This mechanic had seen a lot of custom modifications over the years, but nothing quite like this. And sometimes, mechanics actually do get free lunches at work. And the owner of this truck said, I thought it would go faster if I had to. Customer states, had a roof rack installed by a friend of mine, but now there's a small water leak in the cab. And this Camaro apparently still had somewhere to be. The owner of this car came in saying it had been running great and just needed new coolant and a belt and that everything else was completely fine. The owner of this Toyota Carina had been on his way to visit some family a couple of hours away when he noticed the car wasn't feeling quite right. He made it to the shop and the mechanic found this. Customer came in saying that their heating had stopped working after they recently had a new head gasket installed at a local repair shop. And this guy didn't have the right parts to fix his suspension, so he improvised a bit. And this mechanic pulled the wheel on this one and found a brake rotor so far gone he could bend it with his bare hand like it was made of cardboard. The owner of this car was very confident the car was safe to drive despite the rust because it had always driven in a straight line. The mechanic took it for a short roll in the lot when the rear wheel went full autopilot on him. If someone ever tells you that your DIY car fixes look hella stupid, but they actually work, they're not stupid. And this car came in because the speakers didn't work after the customer had just bought the car off Craigslist from a short guy with a Hawaii t-shirt, a thick mustache, and lots of tattoos. The mechanic who got underneath this one found the undercarriage looking like it had gone through something pretty serious because it had scraping damage everywhere, a bent exhaust, and a chunk of the lower engine block broken completely off, exposing the flywheel underneath. Customer states, need a bigger ashtray. This customer had been smelling something musty for months and thought it was just the air freshener wearing off. The mechanic pulled the cabin air filter and found that it had turned itself into an organic compost storage unit. And this mechanic got underneath a customer's car expecting a routine inspection, but found a frame repair that looked less like welding and more like someone had sneezed rust onto the metal and called it a day. Customer states, arm cramps, but only when driving on the highway. Yummy. The owner of this car came in saying he'd had everything serviced before winter and the differential was the first thing his buddy checked off the list. The mechanic pulled the drain plug and not much of anything came out. This customer came in saying he had just had some work done underneath and that everything had been given a clean bill of health. The mechanic lifted it and found the frame damaged, the oil pan leaking, and oil covering pretty much everything in between. The owner of this truck came in saying that they were in a rush to get home from work 2 days ago and think they hit a rabbit. Must have been B-rabbit. The mechanic working on this one pulled the wheel off and found a brake rotor that had been doing a complete solo performance for quite some time now. The owner of this car had apparently driven all the way to the shop with a roof box clunking on the roof the whole trip because it had never been properly latched onto the roof rack. The owner of this car said that it doesn't roll, but just jiggles down the road and didn't know why. And the owner of this car didn't know he had a portable jacuzzi in the back. And this is exactly how you know a wheel bearing has seen better days. This guy came in saying that the gearbox has been a little stiff lately after his cousin sorted it out for him last week. Apparently he can get it into first and reverse, no problem. Third is a bit of a maybe, and the rest he just skips. This customer came in complaining about their car not wanting to go forwards or backwards despite being in gear. The owner of this car came in saying the fuel economy had dropped off noticeably and he couldn't figure out why. The mechanic opened the fuel tank and found that it was marinating some goods for the weekend barbecue. And this is how you know the previous owner really wanted a big exhaust on his car. When your cooler starts having Shrek piss for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you know you're in trouble. The owner of this car came in complaining about a grinding noise when driving, and this is what the mechanic found. And this spark plug hadn't quite decided yet if it actually wanted to be a spark plug. The mechanic who lifted this one up found the rear suspension barely clinging to what used to be a frame, with a hole in the floor big enough to watch the tire spin from inside the car. When the mechanic told the customer that they might want to replace their ball joints, they apparently just replied, "Thanks, but I know you're just trying to rip me off." This motorcycle came in for a chain adjustment, and the mechanic found the chain having absolutely zero interest in being adjusted. The owner of this car rolled in saying that he thinks he needs to replace the entire outside mirror because of a broken wire. The mechanic barely had to try with this one and happily invoiced the customer $450 for the labor. And this vehicle had a bit of a leaking problem. And this is what a gearbox looks like when the input shaft seal decides it's done being a seal. Customer states, "My dipstick tends to get way too excited. Please advise." The mechanic who got underneath this one found a car that had apparently been in a pretty intense long-term relationship with moisture, and the moisture won. The owner of this car had been on his way to go fishing with some friends when a burning smell started coming from underneath, and this is what the mechanics found. This customer came in saying the steering had started feeling a little lighter than usual, but that it wasn't actually a huge problem as he usually only drives in a straight line. And this is exactly why you don't let your nephew do the interior detailing. Customer states, "Door handle gets a little bit hot sometimes. Please advise." And if you ever come in to swap your wheels at a garage, do this if you want to make your mechanic feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Customer states, "Had a shop do the transmission last month. Said it was good as new. Might be leaking a little, but they told me that's normal for the first few weeks." And when your car starts making its own caramel lattes, you know you're in trouble. The mechanic working on this one found a coolant hose that someone had clearly done their very best to save. Customer states, "My Chevy Colorado has been making a bit of a noise from underneath. My neighbor had a look at it and said it's just a splash guard, but he's not always super honest, so that's why I came in here." The owner of this car said that he was out driving in the middle of nowhere when he suddenly lost all steering. Luckily, a local gas station was nearby and the owner did a little quick fix to help the customer get to the closest garage. And this car came in after the customer's uncle had done some fresh suspension work on it, but the mechanic grabbed the wheel and found it like this. This Jeep was brought in with a pretty decent washer fluid leak. The mechanic found a screw had been removed from the wheel arch plastic, and the washer fluid reservoir behind it had been draining straight out through the screw hole ever since. And this guy had changed his own belts, but had to come in 4 days later because the car now had starting issues. The owner of this Beetle had been on his way to a flea market when the hood started making a strange rattling sound. He pulled over, popped the hood, and found a possum just hanging out. Customer came in saying, but a little condensation in the exhaust is totally fine, right? And this car came in after the customer finally decided that it was time for new brakes. The owner of this car had apparently done a full drivetrain service on it together with the boys the weekend before, and was pretty happy with how it turned out, but had to tow it in 4 days later because now it wouldn't start. And this is exactly why you don't ignore a knocking sound for 9 months. And this customer came in saying, there's a bit of a draft in the cab, but only when braking. Please advise. This customer had been blaming everything from a bad battery to a haunted ignition for why his car kept shutting off at random, and had even taken it to 2 different shops without anyone finding a thing. And this oil pan had turned itself into a metal parts museum. The owner of this car had their boyfriend install a new battery for them, but the car now had intermittent starting issues. Customer states, I commute a lot to and from work and sometimes it gets late, so I just crash in the car. But lately the AC has started to smell funny. Can you check it out? And sometimes mechanics really do have to do proper rocket science to fix a customer's problem. Customer states, hit a hedgehog with extra long spikes and car won't start since. Please advise. Customer came in saying that she had put some healing crystals on the start button a few months ago for good energy, but now the car won't start. Customer states, need a tire rotation. The keys are in the cup holder. The mechanic opened the side door and found that the car had been converted into a laundromat. The owner of this car came in saying, wheels need balancing and there's a little splinter stuck underneath the car. Please check and advise. The owner of this car rolled in saying there's a draft in the cab that he just can't figure out where it's coming from. The owner of this Volkswagen SUV came into the garage saying, my Volkswagen has started to think it's a Tesla. It tries to take turns even when I say 9. This customer had apparently let their cousin balance their wheels for them a few months ago, but now said that they have a slight vibration when driving on the freeway. And this car came in with a gear selector that had apparently made a new friend. And this car came in with an engine that turned itself into a percussion instrument every time someone pressed the gas. Uh-oh. This customer came in and said, a nephew of mine who's a fine electrician did some work on the truck the other day, but now it idles a bit rough. Could you check it out? Customer states, hit a small concrete barrier at the mall, but it was really more of a tap. Can you just check the alignment before my road trip tomorrow? The owner of this car brought it in saying that they have a slight wobble at highway speeds and thought it might just need a balance. The mechanic pulled the wheel and found the inside of the rim all covered in some kind of wall filler. The owner of this car came in for an oil change and casually said that he doesn't believe in showering and that he hadn't had a shower since 2009. And the owner of this car came in saying that their battery has a weird leak, but only when washing off the windshield. This mechanic got called out to a semi-stranded on the side of the highway and didn't even need to pop the hood to find out why it was stranded. And this is exactly why you get a second opinion after another shop says, everything looks fine. Customer states, whenever I shift into second, fourth, or sixth gear, the car jerks pretty hard. What's that all about? And this customer came in complaining about a wobbly steering wheel after they had some wheel work done at a quick fix repair shop. The mechanic who popped the hood on this car found a pretty creative battery and air filter install. The battery was secured entirely with red baggage rope because why not? This truck came in with a starting problem that the customer couldn't for the life of him figure out, until the mechanic popped the hood and found a wiring harness that looked like it had been put together in the dark, with half the wires bare and the other half held together with what someone clearly hoped was enough electrical tape to last a lifetime. Customer states, gas tank keeps refilling and emptying itself. Please advise. And this power steering fluid had been working overtime and had apparently developed an appreciation for a good cafe latte along the way. The owner of this car came in saying he had just found some new wheels at a great price and wanted the mechanic to quote him for putting them on and balancing them. And this customer said that the steering wheel goes up and down uncontrollably whenever they take turns. And this customer came in complaining about a clunking noise after they had some suspension work done at a local quick fix repair shop. And this Mercury Sable came in for an oil change, but the mechanic had to spend a good few minutes underneath it, just trying to figure out where to begin. The mechanic working on this car found the rear of the car sitting on bare rim with a tire that had clearly decided it was done being part of the team. This truck came in for an oil change when the mechanic noticed a beautiful custom paint job under the hood. Customer states, I filled her up 3 days ago, so the tank is basically full. The gauge is probably just being finicky again. And this car rolled in after the owner said, my truck keeps squirting on random strangers on the sidewalk. The owner of this car had been dealing with a random stalling problem for weeks and couldn't quite pinpoint where it was coming from. Turns out it was the keychain the whole time. Customer states, I hear a little knock from the front sometimes, but only when I'm turning. My buddy said it's probably just a loose heat shield. Cozy. This car had been in for a routine inspection when the mechanic found the exhaust had turned itself into a bubble machine. This car came in with a blown up transmission after the owner had towed it behind their RV but accidentally left it in first gear. Seems like a perfectly acceptable amount of wobble. And this engine had been running really rough for the past few weeks, and the mechanic eventually traced it back to the oil pickup tube. The pickup sits at the bottom of the oil pan and is basically the engine's drinking straw, so when it gets blocked, the whole lubrication system starves. This car came in because it was really hard to steer after the owner had driven through a village in the mountains on a dirt road. The mechanic working on this one opened the hood to find the engine doing its best impression of a hot spring, with coolant pouring out everywhere. The mechanic who opened the hood of this 793 haul truck found a few engine parts that had shaken loose at some point and taken out a pretty wide chunk of the engine bay on its way out, punching a hole through the large exhaust pipe and knocking into pretty much everything around it. The owner of this car came in saying the interior had been smelling a little funny lately, but figured it was just a gym bag he forgot about. Customer states, had the drive shaft looked at by a shop down the road. They said everything was tight and that it drives a little different now, but they told me that's normal after this kind of work. And this is what happens when you don't clean your soft top every once in a while. This customer rolled in saying he had a bit of a fuel smell and wanted it looked at before the weekend. Customer came in saying that he needed to put a parking disc in the windshield, but had locked his keys inside, so he had to think fast. The owner of this car rolled in saying they have a steering wheel vibration at higher speeds after they hit a small piece of scrap metal on their way to their day job. Customer states, had my buddy do the brakes last spring, said he kept it simple and only did what was absolutely necessary. Customer states, I've been having a clunking sound from the front for a while, but I think it just needs an alignment. And this car came in with a bit of a leak. And this truck could use a little iron in its diet. Customer states, just need a routine service. Might have hit something a few days ago, but the oil pressure light has been off all week, so I think we're good. This car came in looking like this, after the owner had done some suspension work on it together with their brother and driven it like this for over a month before they eventually decided to come into the shop. Customer states, starting issues. I wonder what might be the cause. This mechanic pulled the oil pan on this customer's car and found something that looked less like engine oil and more like something a Marvel villain would call home. Customer states, installed new brake pads, but car still squeaks when I brake. And this is what happens when you ignore a check engine light for just a little too long. Customer states, had the wheels put back on after a tire swap at a place down the road. I've got a small clunking sound, but I think it's just the new tires settling in. And the owner of this car came in saying that they could only move the seat backwards. The owner of this car had been on his way to a job interview when the gear selector started feeling really vague and loose. The mechanic pulled the selector module and found the connector ball joint looking like this. The owner of this car came in with some starting issues after he had set out to solve his battery problems once and for all by installing a rooftop solar panel and rewiring the entire engine bay all by himself. The owner of this truck had some differential work done at another shop, but had to come in because the shop apparently went a bit overboard with the differential oil. Customer states, front end makes a little noise here and there. I just had new springs put in last month. A friend of mine helped me with it. Customer states, just had the engine done by my uncle. Cost me a fortune, but he said it's basically brand new now. There's just a tiny bit of oil in the driveway, but he said that that's normal for the first few days. Customer states, growling noises when driving on the highway. The mechanic working on this Ford F350 lifted it up and found vice grips clamped onto the brake line, a rear leaf spring split clean in two, and a muffler that had apparently been through something significant, though the owner didn't seem to be bothered with any of it. The owner of this car had apparently been smelling something a little off for a few days, but figured it was probably just the neighborhood. And this customer came in saying that their steering wheel has been feeling loose ever since their friend borrowed it. And the mechanic on this one pulled the headlight bulb out and found that whoever installed it last had apparently not cleaned their hands before. The owner of this car had been on his way to drop off some groceries at his mother's house when he noticed a grinding sound and a burning smell coming from one of the front wheels. The mechanic got underneath and found the lower control arm had rusted clean through. Customer states, need a new spare tire, please advise. The owner of this car came in saying it just needed a quick look at the suspension and that it had been driving perfectly fine right up until last week. This customer was absolutely certain the noise was just road noise because he had new tires put on last month. The mechanic grabbed the wheel, gave it a rock, and found the wheel bearing looking like this. That doesn't seem right. The owner of this car came in saying there was a rattling from the back every time he went over a bump and wanted it checked out before a long drive. The owner of this Toyota Tercel was pretty sure he had fixed the overheating himself after replacing the thermostat and the radiator. What he had actually done was block the coolant outlet entirely with a custom gasket that he designed all by himself. The owner of this car had done some framework on it in a pretty interesting way. This truck rolled in because the customer said he had a slight vibration at highway speeds and figured it was probably just a tire that needed balancing. And this car rolled in with quite the list of problems, even though the customer said he just wanted some new exhaust clamps. And this car came in with a bit of an oil leak. Customer states, yeah, she's got a little rust here and there, but underneath she's solid. Drove her all winter and she never gave me a single problem. The owner of this car had apparently been running the same set of tires for quite a while now and brought it in for a rotation. The mechanic found out there was not really much left to rotate. And I don't know what kind of voodoo spell this battery is under, but despite looking like this, it still works. The owner of this truck had been hearing a little groan from the front end for a few weeks, but figured it was nothing worth worrying about. The mechanic pulled the center cap and found that the differential had apparently been saving up on liquids for a while. The owner of this car was very confident the timing belt had been done recently because the sticker on the engine said so. The mechanic had a look and found this. This customer had successfully hydrolocked their engine after having driven through a shallow creek of water. And this customer came in saying that her biceps has been growing more than usual lately and wanted to know why. This car had an overheating problem, and whoever solved it came up with a pretty interesting solution. Someone had wired the engine fan directly to a wall light switch and just dropped it on top of the air intake. Genius, really. Uh-oh. This truck had been on its way back from dropping the customer's kids off at school when the customer noticed something new and exciting under the hood. Customer states, my car has started to sound like a very angry ceiling fan. And out of all things, this guy had decided to save on the paint job for his front spoiler. And sometimes an oil leak is actually nothing to worry about. This truck had been making some pretty interesting sounds for a while, and the neighbor who looked at it a few months back said it was probably just the exhaust. The mechanic got underneath it and found that one rear shock absorber had rusted clean off its mount and the other side had a Bluetooth shock. Looks great. Customer states, car's been misfiring a little. I did my own ignition wires last spring, so it shouldn't be anything major. And this Holden Commodore came in with some starting issues. Turned out the car had developed a pretty strict one drink minimum policy before it would let you drive it. Customer states, wobbly steering wheel when driving on the highway. The mechanic working on this 4Runner pulled the drive axle and found a repair job that can only be described as pure optimism. And this oil pan was sealed with what can only be described as a cardboard sandwich covered in hot glue. Customer came in complaining about a ringing sound when driving over speed bumps. Customer states, oil pressure light keeps coming on and I just paid a guy $750 to fix it for me, but the damn light is still there. This car came in for a clutch replacement, and when the mechanic opened the transmission housing, he found what used to be a clutch disc had turned itself into something you'd pull out of a dryer. Customer states, yeah, there's a tiny little drip under the car, but my friend said it's nothing serious. Customer states, "Car's been feeling a little sluggish lately, but I just got the turbo rebuilt at a shop my cousin recommended, so it shouldn't be that."